All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at the totally unseen economics driving real estate prices in Greater Accra. If you've ever kept an eye on the property market in Ghana, you know it's incredibly dynamic. But honestly, it can be completely baffling too. I mean, we're talking about a market with a massive 2 million unit housing deficit and mortgage rates hitting a staggering 37%. Today, we're going to crack open some truly groundbreaking data to decode exactly what's going on beneath the surface of those property listings.
So I want you to ask yourself, when you buy a house in Accra, what exactly are you paying for? You probably think you're just paying for the walls, a roof, maybe a nicely paved driveway. But as we'll see, the reality is way more complicated. We're going to explore how some surprising, completely invisible factors, things you can't even physically touch, are secretly inflating or even totally crashing property prices.
To solve this whole pricing mystery, a new study uses something called the hedonic price model. Don't let the fancy name intimidate you. Simply put, it's a statistical technique that basically unpacks the bundle of characteristics that make up a house. It lets researchers assign a specific implicit price tag to every single hidden feature. So instead of just looking at the final asking price, this model breaks it down and says, okay, this much of the price is for the extra bedroom, this chunk is for clean air, and this amount is for the specific neighborhood classification. Pretty cool, right?
Section 1. The Detective's Toolkit.
But to really figure out what buyers are paying for, especially in a market that isn't exactly documented in neat, easy-to-find government spreadsheets, the researchers had to get seriously creative. They essentially built a modern toolkit to peer into the market. First, they used Python scripts to scrape over 1,400 property listings right off major platforms like GG and Mikasa. Then they layered on advanced cloud-based satellite imagery from Google Earth Engine to track environmental factors. And finally, they cross-referenced all of that with official neighborhood classification records from 16 different district assemblies. It's honestly a masterclass in modern property economics.
Because official building records in Accra are pretty sparse, or sometimes just completely unavailable, the team had to go the extra mile. They systematically inspected the actual listing photos themselves to visually code specific structural details, literally going picture by picture to identify if a house had a premium ceiling, what kind of floor finish it had, or even spotting signs of physical deterioration. They essentially built their structural data set entirely from the ground up.
Section 2. The Neighborhood Price Cliff.
Now let's look at how location dramatically shifts property values. And this is where the standard assumptions about real estate just completely fall apart. Historically, banks, property valuers, and researchers all made this logical assumption. They thought neighborhood values had a smooth downward slope. You start in a premium Class 1 neighborhood, step down a bit to Class 2, and step down a similar amount to Class 3. But the data shows this smooth downward slope is entirely wrong. In reality, the market actually treats Class 1 and Class 2 neighborhoods as almost interchangeable.
Here's the crucial point. Moving from Class 2 down to Class 3, it is not a gentle slope. It is a sheer financial cliff. While the price difference between Class 1 and Class 2 is a minimal, often statistically insignificant drop, crossing that border into a Class 3 neighborhood triggers a massive penalty of up to 42% in value. The bottom literally drops out of the price the second you cross that boundary.
As the research commentary so powerfully states, the market draws a hard line between formal quality and basic quality neighborhoods, and every buyer, banker, and developer on the wrong side of that line pays the full cost. This is absolutely profound. It means anyone, especially a bank, valuing a Class 3 property based on those old smooth slope assumptions is drastically overstating its worth. They're totally ignoring the reality on the ground, the unpaved roads, the intermittent utilities, and the lack of amenities that actually define that steep Class 3 cliff.
Section 3. Pricing the environment.
Next, the researchers asked a really fascinating question. How exactly does the environment itself impact the price tag? We are talking about things happening in the sky and on the ground that you might not even realize you're paying for. Let's start with greenery. Using the Sentinel-2 satellite to measure vegetation density, they found that green space commands a massive 30% premium. Now, to put that into perspective, in a lot of developed cities around the world, this premium usually hovers around 20%. The fact that it is 30% in Accra highlights just how incredibly scarce and highly valued greenery is in this rapidly urbanizing, dense tropical city. If you've got trees, you are paying a hefty premium for them.
On the flip side, consider the penalty for bad air. Using the Sentinel-5P satellite, which specifically tracks tropospheric nitrogen dioxide, the study proved that air pollution heavily penalizes home values. If you're buying along the Tama Industrial Corridor or near major arterial roads where all this pollution gets concentrated, the value of the property takes a significant hit. The market is absolutely, without a doubt, pricing in dirty air.
But here is where things get wonderfully counterintuitive. You'd probably assume hotter neighborhoods would be cheaper because, well, they're less comfortable, right? Wait until you hear this. Land surface temperatures actually carry a positive sign. Hotter neighborhoods command higher prices. So why is that? It's because in Accra, heat acts as a proxy for concrete, asphalt, and high-demand, dense economic centers. Buyers desperately want that accessibility and centrality, and they are literally willing to sweat a bit more to get it.
Now, this sets up our biggest mystery yet. We know how to market prices air, trees, and heat. But what happens when we factor in the global flood database? How exactly does the market treat properties that have a documented history of regularly ending up underwater?
Section 4. The Flood Risk Paradox.
Get this. The data shows a positively significant coefficient for flood frequency. Just let that sink in for a second. It means homes in chronically flood-prone areas actually cost significantly more. They are priced higher, not lower. From a sheer common sense perspective, this is a deeply troubling result. Why on earth would anyone pay a premium to be flooded?
The answer lies in what economists call urban centrality confounding. Basically, this happens because the historic, economically vibrant hubs in Accra, places that overlap with the Oda River Basin, the coastal plain, and parts of Tema, just happen to sit in low-lying basins. Buyers are paying a massive premium for the central location and the sheer economic activity taking place right there at their doorstep. They aren't paying for the flood tolerance. The flood risk is just stubbornly attached to the very best locations in the city.
However, the terrifying root of this paradox is a massive institutional failure. Ghana has zero mandatory flood risk disclosure laws for residential property. As the study notes, the absence of disclosure doesn't make the risk go away. It just ensures that the financial system never prices it at all. Buyers literally cannot see the historical flood risk when making a purchase. And because they are flying completely blind, the market fundamentally fails to price in the danger.
Section 5. Fixing the market failure. So what should we take away from this mountain of data? How do we actually use these insights to fix these massive blind spots in the Greater Accra housing market? First, let's look at the foundational structural drivers, which are honestly still the kings of pricing. Developers need to know that raw size just isn't enough anymore. Yes, scale, like adding more bedrooms, boosts the price by about 25%. But the market heavily rewards premium finish qualities too, adding around 15%. Buyers are willing to pay top CD for modern ceilings, concrete slabs, and luxury amenities. Oh, and a quick warning, buying a property that's still under construction drops its value by roughly 20% compared to completed units.
Second, we absolutely need systemic action across the board, based on 3 clear steps. Step 1. Banks and valuers must immediately adjust their models for that Class 3 cliff we talked about, or they risk holding vastly overestimated collateral on their balance sheets. Step 2. Urban planners must protect our urban forests, because the market is screaming that green space is incredibly valuable and scarce. And Step 3. Policymakers urgently need to build a mandatory flood risk registry attached to property transactions to protect everyday buyers.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Until the market becomes transparent, and until tools like satellite data and proper disclosure laws become the norm, we have to ask a really hard question. When you buy your next home, are you really just paying for the walls and the location? Or what unseen, hidden dangers are secretly bundled right into your premium price tag? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you look at the property market forever.